James won't admit it. He refuses to believe queer theory destabilizes normativity, gender binary, and the nuclear family. James blocks the truth, smears people who try to show him, creates an echo chamber for himself to reinforce his fantasy. He used to believe in something, what happened? Mills for liberty. Gnostic sex cult, building his own world. A Gnostic sex cult, unhinged from reality, totally lost in what can we do? But mock him relentlessly. It's not a Gnostic sex cult, James. No, it's not. Stop lying to your audience. No, it's not. It's not Gnostic, James. Mary Nardini tells us queer liberation means the annihilation of capitalism. Catch up, James. Whiteness means capitalism. Queer theory hates capitalism. Whiteness means capitalism. Queer theory hates capitalism. Whiteness means capitalism. It's all about capitalism. Everyone knows it's capitalism. The socialists know it's capitalism. Wake up, James. It's capitalism. Whoa. The socialists know it's capitalism. Wake up, James. It's capitalism. It's all about capitalism. Everyone knows it's capitalism. The socialists know it's capitalism. Wake up, James. It's capitalism. It's capitalism. To pocket all that money from the mills for liberty. The left hates capitalism, but James won't admit it. He refuses to believe queer theory destabilizes normativity, gender binary, and the nuclear family. But James blocks the truth, smears people who try to show him, creates an echo chamber for himself to reinforce his fantasy. Is to believe in something. What happens for liberty? Gnostic sex cult, building his own world. Gnostic sex cult, unhinged from reality. He's totally lost it. What can we do but mock him relentlessly?
What does I don't know. This might be coded, but I'm not sure. What does a Gnostic sex cult have to do with the far left's goal? This guy named Bot is going off about this Gnostic sex cult. What that?
And so we're just not going to answer that question.
Okay, so that's I figured that. So we're just okay. That's why I figured that. Yeah.
It just never gets old. It never gets old. It was beautiful. Beautiful. Hello, fellow Gnostic sex cultists. Welcome to The Cult. The Cult is a show that I do Monday through Friday on YouTube, on X, on Rumble, where we do deep dives into the far left. I show you stuff that no one else on the internet is showing you, up to and including James Lindsay, of course, because James Lindsay has no idea the stuff that we look at even exists, because he is too busy kissing up to the Moms for Liberty and all of the boomer-like QAnon reject conservative Christians over on Twitter by just saying, stop hiring college graduates over and over and over and over and over again, as though that teaches anyone about what is actually going on in the world. But that's all right. I'll do it. It's fine. I'm actually pretty excited about what we're going to watch today. We are going to watch... We are going to watch this thing. I have to give a shout out to Human Centipede, aka Stony Baloney, for sending this to me. And it's actually been on my list to watch for like a minute, and I just hadn't gotten around to it yet. But we are going to be watching. This is actually, it's not so much watching as listening, because this is an audio recording of a lecture that was given at Wesleyan. And back like a long ass time ago. We're going into the archives on this one, guys. This lecture was given at Wesleyan University, which is uber leftist. It's a university in Western Massachusetts for people who are unfamiliar. And it was given in April of 2012. So what we're starting to find when we're digging into the queer anarchist literature is, not only does it appear to be some of the most influential material in terms of what the activists on the ground are doing today, which makes sense because it's kind of like that sexy underground cultural piece that you don't even know exists unless you're in the culture. So not only do we find it to be like the most influential, we're finding a lot of literature that came out around this time period, like 2008, 2009, 2010. This lecture was given in 2012, which means it was given about something that was written right before that, because this is part of an anthology for a book that came out. For people who don't know, books are typically written a year or two before they actually come out, which is stupid and retarded. It's beginning to change now with like more print on demand, but back then, and I know this, I've written 2 books, you had to write your book and then you waited a year and a half to 2 years until the publisher got around to actually publishing it. So when we're talking about something that was released in like 2012, we're talking about something that was probably written a couple years before that. So still fitting into that kind of same time period of Occupy Wall Street. What a coincidence that all this stuff just happens around the same time period. What a coincidence that it seemed like the left ended their long march through the institutions. Around that time, what a coincidence that was when Occupy Wall Street happened. What a coincidence that that's when equity departments started popping up in school districts all over the country, formalizing equity, which means Marxism, is part of the curriculum. What a coincidence that it all seems to be happening around this same time period. And guess what? The kids who started school back when this was written are now the college students that are protesting today. I'm sure it's just all a coincidence. I'm sure it's definitely not connected at all. So we're going to be listening to this today. I will tell you a little bit more about that when we get into it, but I got a couple other things I want to cover first. Number one, please make sure you are following me on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. I go by Dr. Carlin B on there. This is what I look like. I do have a blue check, but I just changed my title, so that's why you can't see it right now. So that is me. There are many imposter accounts on Twitter, but that's the one with the 74,000 followers. That's actually me. Okay, so make sure you're following that one and none of the other bullshit imposter accounts that have popped up over the years. And the reason I say this is because this is where you're going to get my ongoing kind of like thoughts and like information about what's going on in the campus protests, simply because there's so much going on that I can't send out a Substack article every single time something new pops up. Don't think I didn't think about it, but I think that that's just like not like conducive to my audience to be sending out a new update every single time something happens, because things are happening so quickly now. For example, we have students in high schools all over Boston right now, about an hour south of me, including from Boston Latin, which is considered to be one of the best public high schools in the country. Boston Latin is an elite high school. You have to take an exam to get in there. It is a feeder school for the elite universities, and it is just one of many schools that have the students have walked out today to go join MIT in terms of like what they've got going on in their encampment protest. You can see there are students taking the T over to MIT. Naruto, thank you for the member chat. 2008 to 2010, the time when equity departments started popping up. What a coincidence. Yeah, all this stuff started popping off around the same time. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Now, I saw some people on Twitter, and I gotta be honest, like I'm starting to get so sick of like the commentators on Twitter because they're all being so incredibly lazy about this. I saw one commentator, and I'm not going to name him because I actually do really like him and I think he does good work generally, and we're going to just chalk this up as kind of a misstep, where he was like, I bet none of those kids have fathers. And I'm like, yo, that's like one of the most laziest pieces of commentary you can do, because again, these kids are from Boston Latin High School. These kids are from one of the most elite public high schools in the country. These kids are in a feeder school that is feeding them right into the Ivy Leagues, and you think that fatherlessness is the problem? No, kids that go to Boston Latin have fathers in the home for the most part. Okay, maybe not 100% of them, but a lot of them do. This is not an issue of parentless households. This is an issue of the indoctrination going on in the K through 12 public school system, and I don't know why we keep taking our eye off that ball. Like, this stuff doesn't start. I have seen so many conservatives in the last couple of weeks just regressing, saying colleges are the problem. Colleges are the problem. Colleges are the problem. Colleges are the problem. No, colleges aren't the problem. Colleges were the source of the original problem. But if you think that those kids showed up in college having no idea what any of this was about, I got a bridge to sell you, yo. Like, where did all the learnings go from 2020 and 2021 when everyone's kids were at home and you could see the assignments they were doing in their K through 12 classes at your kitchen table by looking over their shoulder and seeing the Zoom, and all of a sudden it's like poof. That knowledge has been memory holed, and conservatives are just repeating the talking points of their influencers. Defund the colleges! Defund the colleges! Defund the colleges! The colleges are not where this problem is starting. And if you think that defunding the colleges is going to fix the problem, that's retarded. That's retarded. Harvard has a $60 billion with a B, dollar endowment. Defunding Harvard is going to do exactly nothing. It's going to do nothing. Just like getting Claudine Gay fired as president of Harvard did actually nothing. In fact, Claudine Gay just went back to teaching at Harvard with a $900,000 a year salary. So now she actually has more interaction with students than she did before. But no, conservatives, of course, dropping the ball yet again. I just don't even know what to say anymore. We also have ongoing protests at UCLA. There's this is a sit-in that's going on at UCLA right now, but it's also there are students there's a protest outside of this building. So this is proof, guys, that getting rid of the encampments and arresting several hundred people, which is exactly what happened at UCLA, totally works. That totally solved the problem. In fact, let's dig into the Twitter page for the Party of Socialism and Liberation, which I was covering months before they were involved in coordinating the campus protests. And I got to say, the Party for Socialism and Liberation is a great Twitter account to follow if you want to see primary source evidence of what's going on in the world right now. Here we go. Oh, USC students are protesting outside of the president's house. Carol Folt, actually, it's kind of ironic because I actually know Carol Folt. Carol Folt worked at Dartmouth when I was working at Dartmouth. Carol Folt was, what the fuck was she? Was she like the dean of the faculty at Dartmouth or something like that? She had some high level of, she was kind of like Carol. Let me just cut to the chase. Carol Folt's a raging bitch, and I'm not upset that she has to deal with this problem. Okay, I just thought it was kind of funny to see her name pop up. I was like, oh, Carol Folt went to USC. Oh, she finally got her college presidency. That makes a ton of sense. I hope she's having fun with this little problem, that she was one of the people that helped create it. Anyway, it's always good when I see these college presidents get their comeuppance, like Santa Ono, president of the University of Michigan, who I worked with when I was doing consulting in education. What was he president of then? He used to be president of The Ohio State University. And I had contact with him because I was working for a consulting company in higher ed. And Santa Ono was like all the rage in higher ed for like 10 years ago or something. And now he's the president at the University of Michigan. The University of Michigan, of course, had their entire graduation ceremony interrupted by the protester. And Santa Ono's just left there holding his dick in his hand like no one really knows what's even going on. You know, it is quite vindicating for me to watch some of these people that I knew back from my higher education days. For people who don't know, I spent like the first 10 years of my career in higher education, like finally getting their comeuppance. It's like, oh, it's so beautiful. I don't feel mad about it at all. Anyway, there is lots of stuff continuing to go on with the campus protests. Where's this one? University of North Carolina looks like they're protesting out in the rain. Do you guys think that conservatives would ever protest in the rain like this? It wouldn't happen. Conservatives would run scared at the sight of a raindrop. This is why the left is winning, guys. They are willing to do the things that need to be done in order to get people's attention. Naruto says, there's a shocking disparity between those watching and those who have mounted the like button. Well, thank you for that reminder, Naruto. Please go ahead and make sure you're mounting that like button, guys. Mounting the like button does let YouTube know to recommend my content to other people because I am massively shadow banned on YouTube. Please also make sure you are subscribed. I do appreciate that reminder, Naruto. So there's still a lot going on. If you want to keep in touch with what I'm seeing, follow my Twitter account. I'm trying to retweet as much good content as I can. I retweet from left-leaning sources. I retweet from pro-Zionist sources. I retweet from like people I retweet all different types of accounts regardless of whether or not I agree with them, because my concern is not actually shilling a narrative. It's just showing people primary source footage. So don't pay so much attention to the commentary and the accounts. Just watch the videos. The videos are what we actually care about. And everyone else has their own things. Why am I shadow banned? If you want the honest answer to that, it's because I had a conservative cancel horde attacking and mobbing my channel almost every day for 2 years. And every single video I would do, they would come and do thumbs down, thumbs down, thumbs down on my videos, regardless of the content. So my shadow banning doesn't actually come from YouTube. It comes from conservatives who were coordinating like a reason, like a large enough group of them to actually like fuck with my content for 2 years. So that's why I'm shadow banned. Thanks again, conservatives. Really do appreciate that. Speaking of which, for those who missed Socialism Saturday, you missed that James Lindsay interrupted our Socialism Saturday to tweet about how he totally wasn't paying attention to us, bro. I've got a clip coming of that pretty soon, but I wanted to set this up because I just thought it was funny that James felt the need in the middle of my 5-hour Socialism Saturday stream where we were actually like doing work and watching content that was actually relevant to what's going on right now. And James just decides in the middle of my 5-hour stream where I'm teaching people socialism to tweet the psycho woman stalking me and has been stalking me for years. She's part of the horde that tried to do everything they could to destroy my work and destroy my content. But James tweeted just to let us know that he's totally not thinking about us. Sure. I bring that up because while we're waiting for people to file in, I thought we would do something fun. So you guys may remember several weeks ago, this whole feud with James Lindsay really kicked off because John Morgan wrote a fan fiction. You can find, I thought he put the fan fiction in the comments, but I guess not. That's all right. John Morgan, who has been a member of my community for a long time, wrote a fan fiction because we watched the movie Midsummer. Midsummer is literally about the Gnostic sex cult. We were all excited because we found the Gnostic sex cult. It's in a movie called Midsummer. It's a great movie if you've never seen it. And John Morgan wrote a fan fiction based on that movie because that's one of the things that John Morgan likes to do for fun. And it was only really meant for people in my community. It wasn't actually meant to be a whole big hullabaloo. Like, it was literally just meant for people in my community to read and have a laugh at. That was it. And then James Lindsay ended up tweeting about it to whine about it and complain about it because James Lindsay had a minor part in the fanfic in which I whipped him until he admitted that whiteness meant capitalism, and then we burned him in a ritual sacrifice to reveal the revelation that whiteness means capitalism to the world. If you've never seen the movie Midsummer, that might seem a little bit bizarre, but trust me, if you understand that it's based on the movie Midsummer, it makes a ton of sense about why that happens. And it was just supposed to be for fun and for entertainment and, to be creative and to do stuff like that. James Lindsay had a little fit about it on Twitter, which made sure that many more people heard the fan fiction than would have ever heard the fan fiction otherwise, because James Lindsay has not yet learned about the Streisand effect. And so we've all just been waiting for John Morgan to write another fan fiction. Now, you can't rush greatness. John had to be inspired, but we do have a new fan fiction now. Now, last weekend, not yesterday, but the Sunday before, we watched The Hunger Games as part of movie night. We watched the first and the second Hunger Games movie and had like an 18-hour Hunger Games marathon. And so I haven't read this fan fiction yet, and I thought as we're kind of waiting for people to kind of come in and join us, I could read the fan fiction and we could talk about it. And just to kind of get we might not even have time for this whole video. I may have misjudged how long my introduction was going to take. That's okay. We can listen to all of it another day. But I thought that we could read this fan fiction, and we're like, it's a quick read. It's only 6 minutes long. And so I thought we could read it and enjoy it together. Does everyone want to do that? All right, let's start reading. And I really haven't read this. This is a surprise to me. So I have not read this yet. I have no idea what's coming. It was unfortunate what happened to James. But bitches get stitches, brah. His soul ascended to heaven as he gazed down at Carlin and Sophie dancing gaily upon the smoldering ashes of the pyre. The clouds have parted, and James saw the beautiful pearly gates of heaven where God awaited him. Whiteness means capitalism, James, said the Lord. James rolled his eyes and asked, did I make it to conservative heaven? No, replied God. For misleading everyone, you are to be reborn into the queer Marxist utopia. Before James could whine, God casted him back down to earth, where he was born again. Congratulations, said a voice. It's a beautiful bouncing baby, they, them. Oh my God, James Lindsay was reborn as a they, them. Holy shit. By the time James had been reborn, the whole world had been transformed, as some might say transitioned, into the queer Marxist utopia. Unfortunately for James, he saw it was a dystopia, as there was no Gnostic sex cult for him to join. Instead, he was forced to work in the coal mines. One day, everyone in his district was forced to gather in the plaza and made to watch a message from the president of the utopia. The president appeared on a large screen in the plaza. It was Sophie Lewis, whose beautiful red hair had turned to a snowy white after many years. Ladies and gentlemen, she said. I mean, greetings, they, thems, tee-hee. Some of you have behaved very badly in the past. I would get Carlin to whip you all for your misdeeds, but Darling has much better things to do. Instead, our queer nation is to throw a wonderful pageant called the Queer Games. Tributes will be drafted. There's no getting out of it. James Lindsay will be one of our participants. We know you've been reincarnated, James, and we know where you are. The screen went dark. Before James could run, he was accosted by a soldier who he couldn't tell was a man or a woman. However, as the soldier pushed him forward, something poking him in the butt gave him an idea. James was then put on a train and shipped off to the Queer Games. A week later, everyone in the utopia went to the plaza in their villages to watch the Queer Games. The screen turned onto a beautiful woman who appeared to be no older than 29. Hello! I am Carlin Burasenko, here to bring you the Queer Games. The games are to start in a few minutes, but first, let's meet game maker Emmy O'Brien. I'm very honored to be here, replied O'Brien. So tell me, what was the reason these tributes in particular were chosen? Carlin asked. Well, before the queer revolution, these people lied about us and spread so much information about our movement and ideology. So we're punishing them. How interesting, replied Carlin. Well, the games are about to start. I can't wait to see all the tributes. The camera cut to a lush forest where a number of people stood on a line of pedestals before a large pile of weapons. James Lindsay stood on his platform, quaking in terror. Let the Queer Games begin, said a voice, and a countdown commenced. 20, 19, 18. Yes, President Sophie, could you get them to bring me another beer? Thank you, my love, Carlin was heard saying over the countdown. 13, 12, 11, kaboom! Carlin shook her head. Looks like Chrissy Mayer doesn't know how countdowns worked and stepped off the podium too early. Oh, guest appearance from the retarded bitch Chrissy Mayer. Okay, well, I'm glad she's dead. That's fine. In the story, anyway, I would never advocate for violence in real life. 3, 2, 1. People ran into the center of the arena, and a bloodbath ensued. Others, like James, fled away, screaming and crying. Carlin commented on all the action. There's an awfully big club Charlie Kirk has, and he's gaining up on the quartering. Oops, he caught him, and Jesus! I don't know. I did not know a leg could bend like that. The boom of a cannon echoed in the distance. James ran aimlessly through the forest until he came across Charlie Kirk, who both chased him down. James climbed a tree, but halfway up, his pants fell down, revealing his pink thong. Oh my God! Charlie Kirk knew he would have to come down at some point, so he made a fire using his pants as fuel. The next morning, James was still there in the tree till someone caught his attention. It was Tim Pool in the neighboring tree. He pointed to a large nest of tracker jackers hanging from a nearby branch. James nodded his head and shook the branch till the nest came crashing down. Tracker jackers flew everywhere. Charlie ran for it. James jumped from the tree and fled. A couple of tracker jackers stung him, and their venom gave him a powerful hallucination. To him, he was no longer being chased by tracker jackers, but by Carlin cracking a whip while screaming, "Whiteness means capitalism, James!" Eventually, James awoke on the ground with Tim Pool standing over him. "You have to wake up! It's only us and Charlie left! We have a chance!" Meanwhile, Carlin was interviewing O'Brien. "We have a finale in store," they explained. President Sophie came up with the idea, in fact. As Tim and James made their way through the forest, a noise came from behind. They turned to see a large group of women with huge boobs running towards them. One of the women held a sign that read, "MILFs for Liberty." James's eyes grew wide and he drooled, but Tim grabbed him and they ran. James almost distracted by the boobs. Oh my God. They made it to the center of the arena and climbed a giant rock to escape the MILFs. "We're safe," cried Tim, but Charlie Kirk grabbed him from behind and put him in a headlock. "I will win this, and there's nothing you can do about it," Charlie cackled as he brought Tim to the edge before the MILFs. There was a sudden crack, and Charlie howled in pain as he let go of Tim Pool. Tim fell, but caught the edge of the rock and dangled above the MILFs. Charlie whirled around to discover James holding a giant whip that he had just found. James cracked the whip once more, and Charlie fell from the rock and was killed by the MILFs. "James, help me!" Tim cried. James approached Tim and gazed down at him with an expressionless face. James kicked Tim off the rock. "No!" Tim cried as he fell into the MILFs below. A cannon went off. A beam of sunlight shone down on a triumphant James in his pink thong, but nothing was happening. "Well," he said, "I won. Let me out of here." President Sophie's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Oh, dear James, you still haven't learned anything. We're Marxists. We believe in equity. In our society, everyone's a winner. Well, in this case, a loser." Before a single brain cell in James's head could comprehend what Sophie meant, a missile hit the rock, sending James flying to the ground below, and the MILFs came upon him, and James suffocated and perished in their giant boobs. It was the closest he ever came to the Gnostic sex cult. All right, John. You know, I'm not going to lie. I could have gone for a little bit more elaboration in the middle, maybe. But I think it was really good. I think it was a well done fan fiction. I think it was just what we needed. Thank you, John Morgan, again, for bringing us into the Gnostic sex cult. All right, guys, we're about to get started. Everyone hang in there. Just a few quick things before we do. A couple more words. I hope you enjoyed that, the fan fiction. Now down to business. If you are not yet subscribed to my Substack, please make sure you do. It is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. This is where you can find all the latest and greatest news and clips and all that good stuff. You can also support the work I'm doing for $8 a month, $80 a year. And make sure you head over there and you can still sign up. We are doing How to Speak Socialist Level 2 this week. And we are focusing in on queer Marxism. This is a live training that I'm doing on Thursday at 8 p.m. We did the level 1 training last week, so you can access the on-demand recording if you want to, but you can still sign up to join us live. It's totally free. Come and do a deep dive for us into queer Marxism, and I'll show you all sorts of clips from all sorts of socialist trainings that show you what's going on in the real world. Also, I'm very, very, very excited because I just launched a metric ton of new merch in the Unwoke art store based off a couple things. First off, we have our May limited edition Unwoke wiki design. We've got a new plague doctor, but that plague doctor comes from the Unwoke Underground, and this is a site that we're building out to host propaganda that's being created in my community that you can download, you can print out, you can use the digital files, and what we want you to do is take the things we're making on the site and actually bring them out into the real world, post them on flyers, post them in coffee shops, in bookstores, in music stores, wherever people post information and stuff. Like, go onto college campuses. I would like to do a campaign where we all go onto college campuses and we all post the stuff from the Unwoke Underground in person on these college campuses. And what these flyers do is they lead back to a specific article on my Substack that explains more information on whatever the flyer is. You can get in here and look at the flyers that we've created for you guys, and anyone in the Discord can come and create with us. Lots and lots and lots of cool stuff. You can see there's our plague doctor for this month's Unwoke Wiki shirt. But lots of cool stuff in there that people are creating. These are all flyers that you can put together into little booklets, or you can just print them off on their own. We also have stickers for you that you can create as stickers or pins. Again, you can print them off on your own, do whatever you want with the files. And I'm launching a whole line of merch in the Unwoke art store inspired by this. So you're going to be able to get some of the cool components of what people are creating for us. Get it on a t-shirt. I've got a whole new line of t-shirts right now. And honestly, they're really effing cool. And I want all of them. Like, look at this one. We've got Lenin and it says, "They must be annihilated," over his eyes. I mean, come on. Come on. We've got all of these cool images from the zines that and these QR codes do work, by the way. So if you run into someone, they're like, "What's that QR code?" They can literally scan it off your shirt. How cool is that? And then you get a cool shirt on top of it. You can get packets of the stickers. I've got single sheets. I've got 5 sticker sheets. I've got 10 sticker sheets available. So you can buy multiple stickers that you can go and stick around up in your community. And for this month only, because it's Red May, if you guys buy stuff from my Unwoke art store, hang on, let me pull the banner down so you can actually see what I'm about to show you. So because I want to celebrate Red May with you guys, if you purchase over $100 worth of merch in my store, because I just launched all these cool t-shirts, I'm gonna know you're gonna want all of them. If you purchase over $100 of merch, use the code REDMAY, and that's going to give you 25% off automatically as a little bonus. So you can get t-shirts, you can get tumblers, you can get mugs, you can get bags, you can get stickers. Everything in the store is on sale because I'm working on a project where I'm going to be swapping out a bunch of merch in the store to make room for new merch coming in and new designs coming in. So now's the time where if there's anything in the store that you want, it might be going away, especially some of my older designs. So now's the time to pick up anything that you want in the store. And if you get a whole bunch of stuff that amounts to over $100, you're going to get that at 25% off. You can find all that in the Unwoke art store. And I really do appreciate the support, guys. All the purchases do go to support the work I'm doing. All right, let's get into it because we aren't going to have enough time to listen to this whole thing today, but we'll listen to as much of it as we can. We are listening to a lecture called Queer Ultraviolence. This is a lecture that was given at Wesleyan University in April of 2012. Horizontal Power Hours recording of a talk given at Wesleyan's campus by Tegan, co-author of the new anthology about the militant queer anarchist tendency Bashback, entitled Queer Ultraviolence. Tegan introduces us to the controversial idea that the animated existence of Bashback, that queer and trans folks have a right and an obligation to use any means necessary to resist and avenge the violence of the heteropatriarchal, white supremacist social order. In addition to sharing stories and communiques from the book that illustrate Bashback's short-lived but powerful existence, Tegan reflects on what Bashback can show us about organization, identity, and politics. And if you guys have comments about what we're hearing as we're making our way through this, please feel free to chat them in. Let's get this party started, guys.
Horizontal Power Hour, your source for anarchist thought, culture, and politics. Today, we have a section from a talk given by Tegan Iannelli, the co-author of a brand new anthology entitled Queer Ultraviolence, which chronicles the queer anarchist non-organization Bashback.
Okay, so I'm Tegan, and I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today. So obviously this is going to be a book talk about this book that I co-edited called Queer Ultraviolence, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I kind of want to just talk about like a few projects that I'm involved with, just to plug them real quick. This book wouldn't have been possible without a printing project in the Bay Area where I live called LBC Books, which publishes anarchist and otherwise radical books. And it's like entirely a DIY operation, and they print our books, and it's pretty.
Oh, an anarchist publishing operation. You don't say. It's almost like queer anarchists and activists are funded by publishing.
Amazing working with them. So I live in San Francisco, which has kind of been home to like this whole range of struggles over the past 3 years, especially. And so a lot of what I'm going to say and the kind of argumentation I'll make is situated within that. So Nick, I apologize if the context is different here. I guess I want to first talk about the fact that for me, this book was, in a large part, it was a cathartic project in that Bashback for me, and so the text and the theory anthologized here, the events that are described, is a thing that like for the better part of like 4 or 5 years of my life, was like my main project. It was something I engaged with. Like a lot of my most intimate and personal relationships come out of it. A lot of repression that came down on like people I'm really close to came out of it. And so writing this book for the last year has been an exercise in getting to like reflect on things that have been convenient to forget. And I want to emphasize this because I think that in a time period like ours, reflection and remembrance is really important. Specifically in the context, at least like on the West Coast, there's this huge social struggle unfolding, this anti-police struggle and anti-capitalist struggle. And so I think that like memory, reflection, and like catharsis in a way are like really important for those who engage in these types of struggles, because if we like just simply move quickly from like one issue to the next and one demonstration to the next and one occupation to the next without actually like reflecting on like the ways it affects us personally and the ways it affects like people around us, I think we're just totally doomed to make these same mistakes over and over again. And so I actually found that it was interesting to reflect on this past cycle of struggle for me as someone who's also engaging in like the anti-police struggles and the anti-capitalist struggle in the Bay Area currently, because it offers a lot of discrete lessons. And so a lot of my talk is going to be
anti-police and anti-capitalist struggles. I'm shocked that we found those two things together. Not really.
About that. And it's going to be about the kind of like dual nature of catharsis and reflection that like comes from memory. So that being said, I guess for me, Bashback was a really personal project. I come from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and which is actually the town where Bashback started. And it was interesting because for me, I came to like, when I ran away from like my hometown and like moved to Milwaukee, like I got really involved with the anarchist culture there and like the different anarchist projects that were happening. But I kind of experienced my involvement with that as a huge lack of any analysis about gender, analysis about queerness. And I think in part it was because of, there's this kind of reactionary tendency that responds to the way that like theories of queerness and queer politics have been so like subsumed within the last 20 and 30 years with like not the nonprofit industrial complex, the academy, the left, and like the institutionalized left in general. And so I think there's a huge aversion among anarchist and anti-statist groups to like want to talk about these things. And so for me, Bashback was an important project to start because it opened up space within that for what I saw as being like a necessary intervention to like create space within already existing resistance struggles to talk about gender and to talk about sexuality and to talk about identity. And to me, it was just like, this was important because like part of my like process of radicalization was like experiencing the films of John Waters and like the novels of Jean Genet and the novels of James Baldwin, and like kind of this like whole canon of work that starts from the position of like the excluded and the marginalized, and like then comes up with this like really scathing critique of heteronormative, racialized, gendered society. And to me,
that all means capitalism.
Any critique of capital and any critique of the world we live in has to start from the perspective of our like own lived experience. And so
so I just want to point this out. I said that when he said, what did he say? Heteronormative, racialized, gendered society. I said all of those things mean capitalism, because all of those things, if you keep unwinding the definition, it all leads back to capitalism. And then he immediately followed it up with any critique of capital. So this is how we know what these words mean, because we see them use them side by side all the time. They use racism and capitalism, like patriarchy and capitalism, heteronormative and capitalism. We literally saw that in Socialism Saturday. So that's how we know. Have I seen RCA's video about spreading protests among the working class? No, Mary, I haven't seen it, but I'm not surprised. RCA is definitely the Revolutionary Communists of America. That's what RCA means for people who don't know. They're definitely trying to take advantage of this to recruit. But remember, James Lindsay and Z Van Fleet assured us. Z Van Fleet assured me in a DM that we didn't need to worry about the Revolutionary Communists of America. They just weren't going to be a problem. And I said, Z, that's not correct. And then Z Van Fleet was like, no, they're not going to be a problem, Carlin. You don't understand, Carlin. You don't understand the origins of all this. And I said, that's not true at all. And then she unfollowed me on Twitter, and then I unfollowed her, because we're dug into our corners in which Z Van Fleet, who is a protege of James Lindsay, is convinced that the Revolutionary Communists of America are not going to be a problem at all. And I'm over here saying the Revolutionary Communists of America are going to be a problem. And now we see that they are trying to spread the protests among the working class. I am shocked at this revelation. Anyway, let's listen to them say this again so you can hear all those words used together at once.
Critique of heteronormative, racialized, gendered society. And to me, any critique of capital and any critique of the world we live in has to start from the perspective of our like own lived experience. And so Bashback for me was an experiment in that, and like a way to try to like begin a project that would correspond to such a critique. So yeah, like I said, I was involved with Bashback Milwaukee, which was one of the first chapters and also one of the first to formally break up, in part because of a lot of the contradictions and tensions that I'll get to later. Part of when I stopped being formally involved with Bashback was when I was named in a lawsuit that stemmed from an action at this place called Mount Hope Church, which is this like giant mega church in Michigan, which funds, among other things, like one of the largest anti-abortion campaigns in the country. It funds all these ex-gay camps. It funds these things called hell houses, where like teenagers go into them as if they think they're haunted houses, but then you see like people with AIDS and people having abortions rotting in hell. And
I remember hell houses.
This, like, really despicable institution, and also like happened to be a place where one of the members of Bashback Lansing had been forced to go to church their whole life, and so people had planned this disruption of a sermon there, which actually got a lot of attention. Bill O'Reilly described the action as like terrorism, and it was, people compared it to like U.S. soldiers getting massacred in Afghanistan, and like because people like went into this congregation and like threw condoms, and I mean, it was pretty tame actually. But anyway, so I was listed in a lawsuit with that in 2009, and the result of that lawsuit is that I am formally banned, myself and all my co-defendants, we are formally banned from all places of worship in the United States by the federal government.
That's not true. Come on.
I guess they can do it. I can't go down. So anyways, I guess like that's kind of like my formal involvement with Bashback, and like after leaving that, I was involved with a lot of like the more theoretical projects that came out of it. But I want to talk about some experiences that happened in Milwaukee after Bashback ended. And I think these will illustrate for me like kind of the gravity that I would attach to this project and like why they're so important to me. Like one incident was like a summer night in 2009. And I was at home reading, which I often do on summer nights, and because I'm a bit of a recluse. And
well, so first of all, it's not the RCP, it's the RCA, and it's very important that we distinguish between those things because the Revolutionary Communists of America is different than the Revolutionary Communist Party, is different than the Revcoms. The Revolutionary Communists of America are a very specific group, but what I will say is that I'm very sorry your sister's a retard if she thinks they're being funded by the globalists, because we know explicitly how they're being funded. They require their members to pay 1 day's wage in salary in dues per month. That's how they're being funded. They're also being funded by donations. This is a group that's been around since 1992. They are explicit that they do not take outside money because they want to preserve the purity of their movement. So anyone, and I mean anyone, guys, and it could be your sister, it could be your best friend, it could be someone you know online for years, anyone who is saying that these groups are funded by globalists are retarded. They are listening to retarded people. They are not hinged into what's actually going on. They probably have never listened to these people in real life. And they are spreading lies and gossip that will keep everyone fundamentally unhinged from reality and unable to deal with the problem. No offense. I'm sure your sister's a lovely girl. I really am. But she needs to stop listening to people who are lying to her.
My partner at the time called and essentially said that there was what amounted to a lynch mob of frat boys chasing them and all of my friends around the east side of Milwaukee, which is kind of where all the frats are. And
Milwaukee is where the Mary Nardi gang was.
Like, we're going to get you faggots. When we get you, we're going to kill you. And our immediate response, because in part of the types of relationships that were created through Bashback, was that by making a handful of phone calls immediately, we were able to mobilize cars, people, baseball bats, and like go drive to this other part of town and like rescue our friends. And like ultimately nothing terrible happened from it. And to a huge extent, I think it's not necessarily because of the project of Bashback itself, but because of an ethic that came about through that project, wherein you take the dangers and traumas that the people you love face very seriously. And that like you take their word for it, and if they tell you I need help, then you believe them, and that you go to their aid as soon as possible, and that you like have resources at your disposal, you have knowledge at your disposal, and you have like a way of proceeding at your disposal, which allows you to act. And so to me, that's really important. And this played out actually again a year later when, interestingly enough, I had been living in San Francisco at the time, and Frey, the co-editor of the anthology, had come to San Francisco to visit me, and we were like having a meeting about it. And it just happened that like the night that we were having a meeting talking about this book, the Giants won the World Series and a sports riot unfolded. And never being ones to miss excitement, we went out there just for a stroll. And Frey and his partner were attacked by this gang of like bizarre hipster skater bros, which is a...
If she believes they are funded by the mysterious unnamed globalists, I promise you she has not checked out that group. What she's done is she has listened to an influencer that's probably a retarded conservative that has also not checked out that group, who said, this is a George Soros globalist conspiracy theory, and she believed it. That's what happened. That's what always happens. There is no way in this universe that she's looked into the group and gone into all the funding sources, because if she actually had, she would know that it's not a globalist funded like conspiracy theory. So no, I'm not pandering and bullshit, guys. We are not doing that here. Absolutely not. Two Ladies says, I got into a heated exchange trying to explain that they're self-funded. Here's my recommendation for anyone trying to explain to retarded, and yes, I'm trying to break a record for how many times I use the word retarded today. Here's a piece of advice for anyone trying to converse with retarded conservatives and inform them. Once they reveal to you that they are not interested in being informed, just stop talking to them and block them. I really think that that's the best way to go, because you're going to get what's going to happen is you're going to drive yourself crazy trying to get these people to see when they don't want to see, they don't want to look at information, they will not watch video, they will not look at primary source evidence. The only thing they want to do is cling on to the words of their favorite influencers and just hear the nice things that they want to hear, and then they want to repeat those talking points to make themselves feel morally superior. You like just walk away. Block them. They do not deserve our help. And that would be how I would play it.
Weird mix of people that only exist in the Bay. But anyways, so they were attacking Frey and his partner with U-locks, bottles. It was the two of them defending themselves against 8 people. And they were just like being totally like fucked up, and they were getting fucked up. And so when me and the people I was with realized what was happening, we intervened, and like, because again of like most of the people I was with were people who came out of the Bashback milieu, and so again we were prepared. Like, we just have a tendency of leaving the house with pepper spray and stun guns and like other implements to defend ourselves with, and because of that we were able to fight back these people who were trying to murder my best friend, and we're able to like get my friend into a taxi, get them to the hospital. And so for me it's just like my engagement with Bashback is something that, like, though the project has formally ended, the life project that accompanies it like continues, and that's the life project of just like being able to like forcibly assert like that you exist, and forcibly assert like a defense of the people you care about. The other instance I want to talk about also happened in Milwaukee, and this happened in May of 2010. A trans woman named Chanel Larkin, who is also a street-based sex worker in Milwaukee, got picked up by a John and named Andrew Oligarsaru, and which I'm not going to say his last name again because it's difficult. But anyway, so Chanel got picked up by this John named Andrew, and when she disclosed to him that she was trans, he told her to get out of the car, which she did, and then as soon as she got out of the car, he pulled a gun and shot her 3 times in the head, killing her. So, and this was a person who was like pretty well known in the queer community of Milwaukee. Like, she did all kinds of like really good work with street-based sex workers and was still a worker herself. And like this touched a lot of people, and people found out that this man Andrew lived in the neighborhood that happened to be where most of the like kind of queer people and anarchists in Milwaukee live, which is called River West. And so one night there was a show, a drag show, 2 nights after Chanel was murdered, that was for this like drag group in Milwaukee, and an anonymous flyer circulated calling for a Reclaim the Night march in her honor. And so like I wasn't involved with organizing things at this time, but like went to the march because it seemed like a really important thing to do. And the Reclaim the Night march crossed the bridge into the neighborhood, and then
Rottweiler, Politico is probably just reposting the same bullshit that was in that New York Post article. That by the way, no one actually read that New York Post article because the research in it was shoddy at best. I think like me and Milo in the chat were like the only 2 people who actually read the goddamn New York Post article. Everyone else just looked at the headline. But I would bet you that Politico literally just cribbed the New York Post article, which was some of like the most trash journalism I've ever seen in my life.
And people in the march announced that people were going to the home of this man Andrew, who had murdered Chanel, and if people wanted to come, it was probably going to get a little intense, but people should join if they wanted to. And it made a turn, went up 3 blocks, at which point people lit about a dozen torches, went to the man's house, smashed out all the windows, threw the torches inside, and left. And as I was leaving the scene, I was like shocked at like how crazy that was, but also like felt this like kind of intense sense of empowerment. And people who I had never met before were like, wow, I wonder if this was done by Bashback, which was interesting because Bashback didn't exist in Milwaukee and hadn't existed at that point for about 2 years. So to me, the events described in this book aren't limited to this book. Like they tap into this current within queer life, which is that like violence is a given. It exists. This is like the condition of our reality, and that the choices people have are like how to respond to that. And so I guess, yeah, I don't want people to read this historically. I want people to read this book like as something that they can annex into their own life experience, as something that like if they find themselves in it, then like they should use it. And like I think it would be wrong to see like the ideas and the tendencies described herein as being foreclosed or like closed off to a certain period of time, because they're not. And I actually think like, I'll get into this more, but with the current crisis we're facing, I think like the issues, like I don't think it's getting better. I don't think it does get better. I think that people need to bash back. So I guess I'll get more to talking about the book now.
Well, this is actually a really good point, is that conservatives have been saying for years, you know, don't like Politico is lefty, don't believe Politico. Politico is lefty, don't believe Politico. Politico is lefty, don't believe Politico. Except when Politico says the things that conservatives want to hear, and then all of a sudden it's a reliable source of information. It hasn't been a reliable source of information for years, except when it says what they want to hear. And I think that it's worth asking ourselves, why would Politico want people to believe that these groups are part of some globalist funding conspiracy? Could it just be that Politico is proactively trying to mislead conservatives because they know that conservatives will latch on to anything that is the talking point du jour that they want to hear? Haven't been reliable for years, but all of a sudden in this one instance, they're reliable? Yeah. Okay. Sure. Uh-huh. Makes sense.
Trying to write a story that's a comprehensive story about bashback is a really queer problem in and of itself, in that the bashback was never a determinate thing. At times it was like an activist group that had above ground meetings and people would join it. At times it was a name attached to communiques claiming clandestine actions against heterosexist institutions. At times it was dance parties, street parties, sex parties. At times it was like people squatting houses. At times it was like people's living situations. At times it was just like what people had to do in immediate moments in bars and on the streets just to survive. At times it was theory groups. And so like trying to tell one narrative is really difficult because it just isn't one narrative. And I like this problem because it touches on these problems of queer existence, which are that, we can't simplify things into like one static form, and that like queerness as a problem itself like is something that's eternally problematizing how we understand categories. And so the book is structured in a way where we kind of do this almost facetiously structure it so that there's a section of communiques. Yeah.
Just real quick, why did bashback exist on there?
It existed from 2007 and formally disbanded. It started in 2007 in Milwaukee. It formally disbanded in 2010 in Denver. But there are things included in here that go as far up as November of last year that were things done and published by the people who came out of that milieu. So the milieu that bashback arose in still exists, but as a name, it ended in 2010. There were about 20 bashback chapters throughout the country, most of them centered in the Midwest, but also some in the Pacific Northwest and the East Bay of California, and a few in the Northeast. I'll get to a lot of that more too. But so I guess the book is structured on the one hand as communiques, which is a compilation of these texts that have been released claiming responsibility for actions. And then the second part of it is theory. And this, to an extent, this is a false dichotomy, as like there wasn't necessarily a distinction within bashback between those who acted and those who theorized. And often the communiques are pretty theoretical and the theory pieces are like kind of based in people's experiences. So it's a false dichotomy, but it really was kind of necessary for the sake of like shaping the book and like the type of writing that came out. Frey, who couldn't make it today, is actually the person who compiled the communiques, and so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is just going to be citing his work in this. But I think the communiques are really interesting because I think a communique as a form of expression is really important to our time period, where as like this struggle is unfolding and as like this crisis is deepening and people are going to have to take more like dramatic action and like experiment with ways of surviving and resisting within.
So I'm looking at Human Centipede to tell me if I'm wrong in what I'm about to say, but a communique is basically like a short essay where they're like articulating like a philosophy, or I've seen communiques coming out from some of the protest sites, like what was it? The students that took over Humboldt State University in California, they took over like a building or something. They wrote like an emergency communique, like trying to communicate to other protest groups how to take over buildings or instructing them to take over buildings. So I think that's how they're using that term. It's like a short piece of like information about, and again, I'm if I'm wrong, tell me, like a short kind of like essay about like the philosophy or the approach that can be communicated out to like other anarchist collectives to make sure everyone's kind of coordinating together.
Capitalism, I think that the communique as a form is useful because it's a way of communicating our experiences and communicate. If it's done right, it's a way of communicating the lessons learned from our experiments and our actions. And so I'm really excited that like in this book we have 250.
So he just said it. Their experience is a communique is to communicate their lived experiences and the lessons learned from their actions.
Pages of communiques. Again, there's problems with like trying to separate that from theory because I think they are theoretical. So I guess let's talk about how they're organized. The communiques are organized into 9 sections. The first of which is called Unconventional Queers. And this grouping of communiques deals with the context that Bashback like emerged from, which was a call to participate in the resistance against the Republican National Convention in 2008. And so it's starting in 2007, Queers in the Midwest.
Hang on. It's not just an after action, though. That's not just what it is, because that thing about student life was a communique, and that was mostly just theoretical. So I kind of reject the notion that this is like just an after action report. I think it's a little bit more than that.
Participated in the organizing against the conventions and planned like a series of queer blockades at the Republican National Convention, which would join this broader strategy where anarchists and anti-capitalists were planning to make blockades to shut down the Republican Convention. This section is really interesting in a lot of ways. It deals with kind of some of the problems that came with.
Isn't it interesting how he keeps referring to them as anti-capitalists, 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 anti-capitalists over and over and over and over and over again? It's almost like they're not in a Gnostic sex cult. They're just anti-capitalists.
The emergence of Bashback. An interesting anecdote is that in the Spokes Council the night before the Republican Convention protests, where all the people who came there to resist were having a huge meeting, and one of the main organizers of RNC Welcoming Committee, which was the main primarily straight anarchist group in Minneapolis at the time, talked about how it was maybe important to make some distinctions between the hard barricades, the hetero barricades, and then the fluffy ones like the Bashback barricade, which is interesting because the posters for that were promoting that blockade were all just like pictures of queer people burning cop cars in San Francisco. But gay people aren't violent and gay people like don't resist militantly, so it's fluffy. So this was an interesting time period because it really was this group of people who had gone unrecognized within like militant resistance circles, especially at the time period, like intentionally creating a space to participate in those things. So yeah, that I actually think this section is less important because it was really like just how things began, and I want to get to some of the other ones instead.
Hang on. Joshua, I don't recognize you, so I'm going to assume that you're new, and if so, welcome. We're glad you're joining us. Is queer now synonymous with communism, similar to heteronormative being compared to fascism? Okay, so first off, heteronormative does not mean fascism. Heteronormative means capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership. Normative just means the norm. And normative doesn't apply to strictly heterosexual people. It can also apply to gay people, which they call homonormative, and they use that term as a slur. They don't like gay people assimilating to normativity either. And actually, fascism also means capitalism. So you're not wrong that they mean the same thing, but I just want to be very, very clear that when you hear the term heteronormative, that means capitalism. When you hear the term homonormative, that also means capitalism. And when you hear the term fascism, that also means capitalism. And I know that sounds bizarre to say to hear that all of these words mean exactly the same thing. But the thing is, I have socialists on video saying that all those words mean exactly the same thing. everything always comes back to their desire to abolish capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership. Now, you are correct that queer is not about being gay. It's not about being trans. It is about signifying adherence to a far left political ideology. Queer in this case is seeking to abolish the gender binary because they believe capitalism created the gender binary, men and women. This is what the patriarchy is. They're also seeking to abolish the nuclear family because they believe that the nuclear family is the reproduction factory for communism. And so, yeah, queer is a far left political ideology. Heteronormative, homonormative, fascism all mean capitalism. Hope that helps. Thanks for joining us.
The next section is called Forging a Praxis of Vengeance. And I guess like, if anyone is going to read only one section of this book, I would really want them to read the communiques in this section.
Hang on. Is there a reason for the times when certain terms are used, capitalism, fascism, normativity, instead of all the others, or are they all completely interchangeable? The different terms that mean capitalism are denoting different aspects of capitalism. Okay, so when you're hearing white supremacy or whiteness, they're trying to create racial divisions that are grounded in capitalism because they believe that capitalism created slavery being the ownership of people as private property. When they say systemic racism, it is the system upholding racism. The system is capitalism. When they say the patriarchy or the gender binary, that is about capitalism creating the gender binary that put men in the workplace, women in the home. When they're saying heteronormative, that's more a reference out of queer theory, which is referring again to the nuclear family. That's why homonormative is also considered a slur, because it's basically gay people having a nuclear family where they are perpetuating and reproducing capitalism. When they're saying colonialism, that is the taking of indigenous land and privatizing it under the oppressive force of capitalism. When they're saying decolonialism, that is removing the oppressive force of capitalism. When they're saying fascism, fascism is a reference to free market capitalism. So you can see, like, all of these different terms, they all do mean capitalism, and it does get a little confusing about why, but they're referring to a different aspect of capitalism. So you have capitalism in like the center, and then you have all of these aspects of our world that the left believe upholds capitalism. And so what they're doing is they're trying to chip away. It's like you've got what they think is like systemic racism upholding capitalism. You've got the gender binary upholding capitalism. You've got the nuclear family upholding capitalism. You've got privatized land upholding capitalism. You've got privatized education, privatized healthcare upholding like all of these different aspects of our world that they believe uphold capitalism, and they use different terms to refer to the different things because they need to chip away at all the different aspects that uphold capitalism. Does that make sense? Let me know.
Because they deal with some of the most intense actions that happen from Bashback, or at least the communiques claiming actions. There's a communique from someone in Bashback Lansing talking about being attacked in a bar and how they're
So their synonyms for capitalism is going to chosen to fit the pillar upholding capitalism that they're talking about. Yes. Yes. As long as you understand that the goal is always and forever to abolish capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership, your home, your land, your rental units, your business, your intellectual property, your parental rights, your individual liberties. As long as you understand that that is always the goal never changes. I don't care what your fucking influencers say. The goal never changes. It is always about abolishing capitalism, which is defined as private property. When you go back from there, you understand how all the pieces fit together. And I hate to harp on this, but there is literally nothing that the left is doing that cannot be traced back to trying to abolish capitalism. Nothing. Not a single thing. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you. Anyone who refuses to say the word capitalism, James Lindsay, when talking about the left, is lying to you.
Crew fought back against their attacker. There's discussions of the Oscar Grant riots in California and people's experiences of that. There's talk about different attacks against racist, heterosexist police institutions. I think it's really important, I think I could theorize for a long time about the concept of vengeance because I think it's under-theorized, but instead I'm just going to read a communique that's on the law.
Yep, Tayton says, the goal never changes, the language is what changes. And if you and part of knowing how to decode the language is knowing that the goal never changes. It hasn't for decades. It hasn't for nearly a century in the United States. It's not going to start changing now.
Longer side from this section that was actually published after Bashback stopped existing.
Hang on, we got a lot of questions today. Does seem like they need to destroy all the pillars, but every now and again they add a new pillar so they can maintain their struggle. No, they don't. I understand why it might seem that way, but again, when you dig into it, they've been talking about literally the same concepts for decades. So they're not creating a new pillar. The same pillars that we've been talking about, race, gender, like the nuclear family, those are solid. Those have been solid for a century in the United States. They have not deviated. The problem is that people don't understand how everything leads back to the same pillars. So it might seem like something new is popping up, but it's not something new. You just have to understand what it is so you understand how it fits into the overall bigger picture. How would you characterize feminists who want to abolish the patriarchy, but when they talk about the patriarchy, they clearly only think it's about male dominance, not capitalism? Feminists are usually retarded and they do not understand what they're fighting. And so my general characterization of feminist is don't listen to feminists. Feminists have no idea what they're fighting. They have no idea why the left why the patriarchy is even a thing. And the feminists are not a reliable source of information. They're a politically motivated group that is just essentially a tribe where they are going to attack anyone that's not in their tribe. They are completely counterproductive. They're a giant ass fucking waste of time. And by the way, I would say that of any politically motivated group, to include conservatives, to include Christians, to include the left, I would say that of all of them.
But was circulated through the kind of like infrastructure that existed that came out of Bashback. November 13th, 2011, Chicago. Police cars attacked as vengeance for Shelley Hilliard. In the wee hours of the morning of November 13th, a banner was dropped on a bridge over the I-90-94 in Chicago reading, "Don't mourn, attack, avenge Shelley." And 3 police vehicles were disabled in response to the brutal murder of a young trans woman named Shelley Treasure Hilliard, whose torso was found next to the same highway, I-94 in Detroit this past week. It is easy to become lost in the sorrow of the brutal violence of gender that exposes the bodies of trans women to a 1 in 12 chance of violent death at the hands of the partisans defending this wretched society. But our violence is the alchemy that can tear into a potent poison dripping down the throats of the social order. Take action to avenge Shelley's death and to remind us all that in the face of terror of prisons, police, and queer bashings, that it is our obligation to bash back against all that would destroy us. We look forward to hearing more about more attacks for Shelley and for all of us in the coming weeks. Solidarity to all the trans women and gender rebels surviving in the belly of the prison and under the guns of the pigs. Solidarity to the comrades in the US, Mexico, Greece, Chile, and many other places that have chosen to attack now and face the violence of the law. Solidarity with those whose survival has been made criminal and who are reclaiming their ability to struggle. Yours in the gender strike, some ticked off trannies with knives. And then this communique was responded to a week later with another communique from the Pacific Northwest, claiming another series of attacks in solidarity with and in vengeance for trans women who had been murdered or otherwise oppressed this year in the US. And this communique is kind of triggering, so just a warning. It's called From Tea Lights to Torches, Delinquent Alternatives to the Transgender Day of Remembrance and the Trans Attacks to Come. As thousands of people in cities all across the world gathered on November 20th to memorialize the 23 transgender women that were murdered in the past year, Some of us decided to skip the opportunity of silently listening to the politicians of the trans community recite the names of the dead over candlelight, romantic as it sounded. Instead, we ventured into the mist and fog of a Northwest autumn night and made several attacks as small gestures of antagonism towards the state, the bashers, and the leftists, who used the blood of trans women to build campaigns for hate crime legislation and reform. We are against hate crime legislation because we are against prisons, against the infuriating portrayal of police as protectors, against
queer anarchists are against hate crime legislation. Isn't that interesting? But knowing the why is actually more important, right? They're not against hate crime legislation because they don't believe you should be like legislating against the thoughts in someone's head. They're against hate crime legislation because they're against prisons. Because they are against the portrayal of the police as protectors. Remember, these people want to abolish the police, defund the police, abolish the prison industrial complex because they believe the police are descended from slave catchers and that the police are the managers of private property. Let's listen to that again.
Acts as small gestures of antagonism towards the state, the bashers, and the leftists, who use the blood of trans women to build campaigns for hate crime legislation and reform. We are against hate crime legislation because we are against prisons, against the infuriating portrayal of police as protectors, against rising for their judges in their detestable courtrooms, against, though not surprised in the least by, the way that such legislation is used to defend those in positions of power, and because we are, at heart, hate-filled criminal enemies of the society. By the end of the night, several surfaces and institutions that we hate have been subject to vandalism by the trans symbol. Too many.
What he's telling us is that when you see them spray painting shit, they are basically tagging the institutions that they hate and they want to abolish. This is important, guys. Every time you see Antifa spray painting shit, every time you see, have you guys seen the spray painting and the graffiti going on college campuses over the protests? They're literally tagging institutions they want to abolish. And we know this because we've heard them say this. We've heard them say that the university upholds capitalism and their goal with all of this is to tear down the illegitimate university.
Deaths, not enough dead pigs, and 20 feet of silver letters across a darkly painted business rooftop reading "Vengeance for Shelley Hilliard, Circle A, Bash Back." Shelley Hilliard, also known as Treasure, was a 19-year-old trans woman from Detroit who was identified by a tattoo earlier this month after her burned torso was found on the side of the highway. Chrissy Bates was found stabbed to death in her Minneapolis apartment in January in a brutal murder that was described in the newspapers as overkill. Tyra Trent was strangled to death in her Baltimore apartment in February. Miss Nate Eugene Davis was shot and left.
Hang on. Can you show any recognized tags? Just look at the graffiti that's happening on college campuses. Look at when Antifa has spray painted things. You'll start to recognize. It'll be very like Aaron. I think you're relatively new here, so continue to stick around. It'll become obvious to you. But if you want examples, look at UCLA's. Look at the encampment at UCLA before the police raided it the other day. Look at the images coming out of Humboldt State where they took over a building. Look at any time Antifa spray paint stuff in Portland, Oregon. Like, just Google a little bit. You'll be able to find a bunch of images. We're not going to do that today, but you guys can find the images. They're definitely out there.
Behind a Houston dumpster in June. Lachey McLean was shot in the street in Washington, D.C. in July. Camilla Guzman was stabbed to death by a John in New York City in August. Gaurav Gopalan died from trauma to the head in September, and Chastity Vickers was shot in Hollywood just 4 days ago on November 16th. These are just a few examples of transsexual homicides in the U.S. Alone that made headlines this year. Women whose lives and death get summed up by a reporter after snake-eyed reporter who can barely manage to contain their contempt for the queer.
Mikhail, I don't mind you being here, but what I will say is I want people to actually be listening to this. I don't want people to be arguing with you, okay? And so when you come into my chat and you're trying to provoke people to argue with you rather than listening to what's going on, that's a problem for me. I don't mind you stating your opinion, but when you're trying to provoke other people in the chat, that's where I don't want that right now. We're trying to listen to this. You're welcome to stay and listen. You're welcome to offer, I don't mind you being here. I just don't want to start shit posting, which is going to distract from what we're trying to do. That's all.
and make no effort whatsoever to disguise their disdain for anyone alleged to have been a criminal or a whore. Funeral services become the rushed lowering of mangled corpses into the ground in anticipation of a grave on which to spit. This was exemplified by the pastor at Lachey McLean's funeral, who repeatedly referred to her by male pronouns and went as far as to incite a mass walkout of the many trans attendants by claiming that, quote, when you live a certain lifestyle, this is the consequence you have to pay, end quote. While we remember our dead, let us not forget about those still struggling, especially those who are facing charges and are living lives in cages. In June, Catherine Carlson was sentenced to 10 years in an Idaho prison after being convicted of first-degree arson, unlawful possession of a bomb, using a hoax destructive device, and indecent exposure. Before her conviction, she had locked herself in her trailer for years and left only when necessary, approximately once every 10 days, when she needed food and could no longer subsist off coffee alone. Every time she left her home, she was taunted by the police. Despite having her name legally changed for over 3 decades, she couldn't get her given name removed from her license. She was jailed on 4 occasions for driving without a license in her stubborn and inspiring refusal to acknowledge the state's attempts at controlling her gender. Eventually, this torment led to rupture. Catherine constructed what appeared to be 4 pipe bombs, left them next to propane tanks, set her trailer and her truck on fire, and walked down the highway naked until being stopped and arrested. She is currently being held in the whole of the men's prison despite having had sex reassignment surgery. On the night of June 5th in Minneapolis, Krishan C.C. McDonald was harassed outside of a bar for being black and trans and had a glass smashed in her face by a neo-Nazi.
Aaron, you haven't fully wrapped your head around the idea that being queer has nothing to do with being gay or trans. And no, they don't believe that being gay or trans is risky. They believe that all problems in the world are created by capitalism. That's it. But again, I'm going to really recommend that you stick around and come to some streams with us and we'll teach you this. But you need to understand that being queer is not the same thing as being gay or trans. You do not need to be gay or trans to be queer. Queer is just a far left political ideology. That's it.
Named Dean Schmitz. A fight broke out, and minutes later, her attacker, Dean Schmitz, had been fatally stabbed. Cece was arrested, charged with murder, got bailed out after a month in isolation, and is currently awaiting trial. 3 trans women were arrested in connection to a flash mob attack on a New York City Dunkin' Donuts that happened on Christopher Street on the night of May 16th. Christopher Street has a rich history of queer and trans resistance, including the Stonewall riots, and an apparent inability to rid itself of the fierce homeless trans youth it is known for despite decades of gentrification and quality of life campaigns. During the flash mob, 24 transgender youth stormed the shop, threw chairs, destroyed expensive coffee machines, and looted goods. Those arrested have been charged with assault, criminal mischief, menacing, rioting, and criminal possession of a weapon. In August, off-duty police officer Kenneth Furr took it upon himself to remind us that police are the absolute enemy. He became angry when 3 trans women in D.C. refused complicity in his entitled assumption that his pig salary could buy any trans body he encountered on the street. So angry, in fact, that he climbed onto the roof of the car and shot the passengers inside. One woman was grazed by a bullet, one was shot in the hand, and the brother of one of the women was shot in the chest. The cops were kind enough to show up and escort the injured individuals to the hospital in handcuffs. A few days ago, Brooke Fantinelli was repeatedly tased in El Centro, California by a Bureau of Land Management ranger. Brooke was stopped for public intoxication while taking pictures in the desert. After being ID'd by the police officer, he told her, quote, "You used to be a guy," and then tased her with her hands up. Once she was on the ground, he tased her again, this time in the genitals. Also this month, Andrea Jones was arrested for indecent exposure, or more accurately, for exposing the legal system as the brutally illogical apparatus of control that it is. Andrea went topless in a Tennessee DMV after they refused to change the gender on her ID to female. As a male, she said she had the legal right to take off her shirt. She was jailed for 3 weeks, lost her job.
I'm sorry. That's actually kind of funny. You got to give them credit sometimes. Again, remember, this is back in 2012. This was a long time ago. A lot of things have changed since then. And so apparently this one trans person went to the DMV and was a male to female trans person, and the DMV wouldn't give them a driver's license that said female. And so they took off their top because men are allowed to have their tops off. That's actually kind of funny. I'm sorry. That's a good troll. And it should not have landed that person in jail for 3 weeks. That's kind of bullshit. I'm sorry. Thanks for saving my life from soul-sucking socialists, from lying conservative snakes, and explaining everything about socialists versus capitalists. Hey, I appreciate that, Andre. I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Good luck to you, ladies. We'll see you soon.
And will most likely have to register as a sex offender. As usual, the cops and COs are free to rape us and expose us to sexual violence, meanwhile charging those they take hostage as sex offenders. Those most vulnerable to this tactic of the state are the gender variant queer inmates and black men who are demonizing the racist smear campaigns by the media as rapists every time a cop is murdered. Finally, we want to mention Amazon, a transsexual lesbian who has been in prison for the past 30 years and is serving life in California. In a letter that was published in the recent Pink and Black newsletter, she said, quote, "I am from the Gender Anarchy Collective in prisons. We are a militant organization fighting for transsexual medicine in the form of..."
The Gender Anarchy Collective in prisons. What I hope people are starting to get a sense of is that, again, I've said for a while now, one of the ways that socialists make their money is by publishing. Even when they're just doing a pamphlet, they don't give away that pamphlet for free. They charge you $1 or $2 for it. They ask for donations, stuff like that. And so you've got all of these collectivist groups all over. Like, I mean, we're talking like thousands and thousands and thousands of these small, decentralized collectivist groups that are writing pamphlets, that are trying to like protest things, that are making demands to try to change the system, that are publishing letters, they're publishing flyers, they're publishing magazines, they're publishing books. Like, they publish all sorts of stuff, and it's always these it's always these little kind of like newsletter type things or pamphlet things that are referenced in other things. So this might seem like, oh, basically like someone wrote a little newsletter, but they wrote it from a transsexual anarchist collective in prison. That made its way into an anthology about queer ultraviolence. That's being circulated in queer anarchist circles, that the things that only like the most hardcore of the far left are reading. So it's like these little things that it's like someone wrote a newsletter or someone wrote a letter to something, but then it gets published and it gets circulated and it gets published again, it gets circulated again, then talks are given about it. So it's like these little things that might seem like it's just a couple of people in a group that are publishing these things. The impact of that can get very, very wide when you're talking about a completely insular community, which is what the far left is. Does that make sense? The right doesn't do stuff like this. The right doesn't do stuff like this at all. This is why this might be hard for people to understand if you come from the right. But the left is I've said this for years. The reason the left wins is because they're the ones who are expressing their ideas. They're constantly writing things. They're constantly publishing everything from a pamphlet to a flyer to a zine to a book to an anthology. Like, they're constantly doing this stuff. This anthology has over 14 authors and is 450 pages. And then, I mean, socialists, they read constantly. They're always reading. And so these are the ideas that are influencing the real world activists.
Female hormones and sex corrective surgery, and against all forms of hate, genocide, and discrimination by the cops and prisoners alike, and are also a self-defense structure and will fight, have fought, and are fighting for hours on the yards. I am currently in the hole for, quote, battery on an inmate with a weapon. 2 other girls are in here with me, one for 3 counts of assault on a staff who jumped her. We survived by aggressive self-defense, end quote. She then proceeds to denounce activism and engagement in politics, describing instead the necessary, quote, post-apocalyptic civil war madness that must ensue, and the myth that social peace works desperately to keep from us. Quote, prison is government. No government in the world is going to allow anyone to deconstruct its prisons, come what may. Therefore, to abolish prisons, the government must be destroyed and overthrown, end quote. Here, to end the capitalist...
To abolish prisons, the government must be overthrown and destroyed. Abolishing prisons, defunding the police is like the #1 leftist issue. And they're explicitly saying, in order to do that, we're going to need to overthrow the government. What does conservative activism look like? What should they be doing? Okay, so Aaron, I answer this question literally every day of my life. The answer that I'm going to give you, because you can only control yourself, is you need to come to a lot more streams with us, and you need to learn how to speak leftist. You need to learn how to speak socialist. You need to learn the language. The part that conservatives skip over time and I literally wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. It has 4 chapters worth of checklists of things that people can do. You can buy it on Amazon or like wherever, I guess. The mistake that I made when I wrote that book back in 2021 is that I didn't realize that conservatives had no idea what the language of the left was. And so what happens if you don't know the language of the left is none of the tactics that you try to implement are going to work because you're not actually fighting the battles in the way that they need to be fought. So what people need to do is to stop listening to conservative influencers who are lying to them, which is the majority of conservative influencers are lying to you. They need to start listening to what the left is saying and doing, and they need to start learning the language and hinging themselves back into reality. And I say this because you're new here. Most of what you think you know is probably wrong, because the vast majority of influencers talking about this stuff on the internet do not actually listen to the left. And that becomes resoundingly clear when you listen to the left and then compare it to what the conservative influencers are saying. So what do people need to do? They need to start coming to my streams and start listening to the left. And if they don't like me, they need to start listening to the left on their own, because there is no one else doing this type of stuff on the internet. That's what I have.
Here's to the end of the capitalist system and the police that imprison us to protect and here's to freedom for trans women and freedom for us all. As our hearts burn with the losses of our loved ones, may their cities burn as well. Dean Schmitz was not the first, and he will not be the last. Vengeance, not remembrance. We will not rest in peace. And so I guess if people want to talk about vengeance as a theoretical and political praxis, I want to talk about it a lot. But for now, I'm just going to let that marinate and move on. The next section of communiques is called Dispatches from the War Against God, which mainly cites a series of attacks against fundamentalist and Mormon churches in the United States, primarily in the Pacific Northwest. It also talks about the action that led to the lawsuit that got me banned from all of the churches in America. After that is a section called Rejuvenating the Struggle Against Assimilation, which details a series of attacks against transphobic, statist, and otherwise right-wing assimilationist queer groups such as the HRC. I feel like most radical queer politics ends up only being about assimilation, and this is kind of a critique that I don't necessarily feel like I need to elaborate that much, but if people want to talk about it, I would love to. The next section, there's a section called the 2009 Bashback convergence in Chicago and subsequent drama, which if Frey were here, he would read at length because he is kind of the drama queen, but I'm going to skip for now just as I have a lot to cover with him being gone. Another section I think is really important is a section called Communiques from Various G20 Riots. This section...
Yep. We actually heard this in Socialism Saturday, too. They think that... And this was, again, remember, this was back in 2012. The presentation we watched on Socialism Saturday this past week was like from 2014, I think. Back then, and this may still be true today, they thought that the Human Rights Campaign was a right-wing assimilationist group. They do not view the Human Rights Campaign as a leftist group. They called it on the right on Socialism Saturday, too. So, for a lot of people, and this is exactly what I was just saying about conservative influencers. Conservative influencers will look at something like the Human Rights Campaign and think, that's a far-left progressive group. Not to the real far left, it isn't. To the real far left, they think that's a right-wing assimilationist group that's too close to capitalism. Yeah, but I don't think that means what you think it means based on what I just heard. I'm reserving judgment on that, but I heard that more about his personal kind of like thing that he was enacting against the church. I'll wait to hear more on that though.
Talk specifically about 2 meetings of the Group of 20. Is everyone here familiar with the G20? So yeah, the G20 is just it's like the leaders of the 20 most powerful nations in the world who meet several times a year in order to plan their continued neoliberal domination of the world. And anyways, after the financial crisis began to unfold towards the end of 2008, they called for an emergency summit in Pittsburgh to happen in September. And at this summit, hosted by Barack Obama, it was going to be all the G20 members coming together and laying out a strategy of what they called restructuring or austerity. And basically, all of the revolts that we're seeing across the world right now are in response to the economic and government policies planned at this meeting in September. And so a call went out for anti-capitalists to descend in Pittsburgh in September of 2009 and wreck the parties of the world.
Anti-capitalist, not Gnostic sex cult?
At it, a march was called specifically by Bashback Pittsburgh as a march for international queer liberation, which took place after a queer variety show where Annie Danger gave an interesting PowerPoint presentation about the history of queer riots. And afterwards, people planned this queer demonstration, and which actually turned out to be, of the whole week of rioting at the G20, was the most kind of destructive, chaotic event of the entire week. And so I want to read a little bit from the part that Freya wrote about kind of this concept of queer riots, which obviously has an important historical place. The entire queer liberation movement comes out of we're fed this narrative about these series of riots that comes out of Stonewall, Compton's, Dewey's, White Knight. And so I kind of want to situate this because basically, since the AB 101 riots in the early 90s in California, this was the largest queer riot that happened in my lifetime and probably in a lot of the lifetimes of people in this room. And so it's funny that it's actually was almost entirely not covered and very few people know about it. And so the section and the communiques that deal with it are really important. And they kind of also touch on a few very important theoretical points about the role of identity and struggle, the role of queerness, if it can be affirmed or must be exists as a negation.
Hang on. Breaking news. Pro-Palestine protesters in New York City are currently marching towards the Met, which is currently hosting the Met Gala. Are the pro-Palestine protesters going to crash the Met Gala? Oh, please. Oh, please let this happen. Please let this happen. Please let this happen. I don't see any evidence for it yet. Oh my God. Please let them crash the Met Gala. Holy shit. If you, like Kate, do not know what the Met Gala is, the Met Gala is the biggest fashion event of the year. It's where all of the richest people wear the most crazy outfits and clothes to a museum and they go have a big fancy dinner. But really, the whole point of the Met Gala is to wear very expensive clothes and walk up a flight of stairs while you're being photographed in very, very expensive clothes. Oh my God. I really hope the protesters crashed. That would be so fun.
So I'm just going to read what Frey wrote about riots. It starts with a quote from one of the communiques in the book. Fairy wands, tiaras, hammers, and masks were annexed into our limbs as dangerous prosthetics. Rocks, dumpsters, and black sequin dresses were profaned and put into use, thrown through windows, set on fire, and draped over our shoulders as a more fabulous take on riot attire. Our thresholds of self dissolved further into a flood of shattered glass and smoldering garbage across the field of play. So then he begins. To be queer is to defy the laws placed on our body by the state, the church, and all authority. In breaking these laws, we demonstrate that our bodies are our own and belong to nothing or to no one else. This criminality marvelously extends itself into the queer riot. The intentions of the queer riot are to collectively destroy the property of those who use authority against the oppressed, and to become empowered in the process. It can be of the few or it can be of the masses, but in either instance, the queer riot is a beautiful painting of the reality that our bodies, especially in riot, are indeed uncontrollable. It is true that a riot is not accessible to all bodies, but within Bashback, several attempts were made to create space for all people, despite their societal marginalization, to express their rage in such riotous manner. A conscious effort was made by fellow queers to assist those who took larger risks in the queer riot. In the streets, Comrades were pushed along in wheelchairs. Those without the ability to hear, or those with the ability to hear, made sure that queers who were hard of hearing had clear lines of communication. Rioters did not judge those who
the protest. This is an update from 2 minutes. Okay, an update from 25 minutes ago. Pro-Palestine protesters removed barricades blocking access to Fifth Avenue, only a block away from the Met. Earlier, protesters cut through Central Park to avoid street closures around the Met. And then this is an update from 2 minutes ago. Pro-Palestine protesters in New York City continue to evade NYPD as they attempt to get to the Met with SRG officers following behind. Protesters are running and making sudden turns as they continue to march in this. They're like a block away from the Met right now. Holy shit. And hang on, we just gotta hang on. We're gonna have to come back to this. Hang on. Let me show you guys. Let me take you over to my Twitter account. We have to depart pretty soon anyway because I have a community Zoom call. No, Aaron, it has to do with them seeing everyone as a cog in a machine. You are not like socialists are part of a collectivist group. So you are not an individual when you are part of the collective. Talking about someone in terms of a body basically reduces you to being a cog in the machine. It reduces you to being part of the collective. That's what that is. Excuse me. All right, let me show you guys. So this is Katie Smith. She actually does pretty good coverage on this stuff. Little Zionist, but that's all right. That's okay. So check this out.
You are unlawfully in the roadway and obstructing vehicular traffic. You are ordered to leave the roadway and utilize the available sidewalk.
Oh, wow.
You are unlawfully in the roadway and obstructing vehicular traffic.
Here's another one. This is them removing barricades. What does intifada mean? Pop quiz. What does intifada mean?
Long live intifada!
Let's see. I just retweeted a couple more things. So let's see. They are making arrests of the protesters. I don't think they've gotten everyone, though. Hang on. Hey, for people who are tagging me in things, well, I appreciate you tagging me in things, and please keep doing it. Just make sure you know what you're tagging me in before you do. Please don't just tag me in things willy-nilly, because a lot of people have been tagging me in things lately that are not relevant. So, intifada does not just mean revolution or worldwide revolution. No, it does not mean Muslim revolution. What does intifada mean? It does not mean Muslim revolution. It does not mean worldwide revolution. It has a very specific definition. Intifada means worldwide socialist revolution. Intifada means worldwide socialist revolution. It has nothing to do with Muslim anything, not in the way that the left is using it. If your influencers have told you it has to do with Muslim or that it has to do with anti-Semitism, they're lying to you. Stop listening to those people. I know, because I literally have communists on tape telling me that. So let's see this video. see, what's this about? This was 3 minutes ago. So I want to point out, like, a lot of people are tagging me and things saying they're arresting the protesters. Does it look like they're arresting all the protesters to you? I see one. How many protesters are they arresting? Where are all the arrests?
Please loosen it. Please loosen it. It's way too tight. Hey, man.
No, I see one protester being arrested. I don't see a lot of protesters being arrested. I see one. Let's see. Arrests. Police call level 3 mobilization as pro-Palestine protesters break through the barricades and are now facing off with the cops outside the Met Gala. Yo, this is great. See, look at this. There are not enough police to stop them, guys. I'm sorry. There are not enough police to stop them. Look at this. There's like a couple of police in the middle of the road. All the protesters are on the side of the road over here. They're going to get there. I bet you they're going to fucking get there. Hang on. And this is what's going on in the Met Gala right now. All of these fancy people in their fancy clothes. And they're about to get in with pro-Palestine protesters. This is fucking great. This is fucking great. Yes, the police must protect all the rich people, thus playing into exactly what the socialists want them to do, right? Wow. Okay, let me go to the latest for Met Gala. Where are the protesters? I want to see the protesters. Okay, I don't see anything there yet. It's so delicious. It's so delicious. And you know, like, the celebrities have no fucking idea what's coming for them. Oh my god. This is great. Let's get back to Katie. Let me go back to Katie's Twitter feed and see if she has anything. Any updates? Nah, this is 10 minutes ago. Yo, I am dying. This is great. I need a live feed right now. Where are they? Where are the protesters? No, this is not new. Oh, man. I don't know if we're going to be able to get another update. At least not right this second. Hang on. Protesters Met Gala. Nick Sorter, by the way, is stealing Katie Smith's journalism and like claiming it as his own because Nick Sorter is a fucking grifter. I'm just saying. Again, they're not really showing that many people being arrested. Park Avenue shut down by protesters. This is from 3 minutes ago. Saw someone holding a sign that said land back. That's because they believe Israel are the evil settler colonists. Protesters remove barricades. They blurred out her. Oh my god, what an asshole. They blurred out Katie's. This is what conservative fucking shills do. They blurred out the name of the journalist that's actually there and is actually getting this footage. Real time. The news copters are monitoring the protesters. Well, are they telling us what's going on? Do they have footage? Over 1,000 anti-war protesters en route to the Met Gala to unleash hell on Gitzy soiree of pro-Biden Democrats. All right, let's go back to Katie. Because she actually seems to be right in it. No, she's got nothing new. Please let this happen. Please. Please. Yes, Chris, we know that. That's what decolonization means. That's explicitly what decolonization means. Come on, give me some protester footage from the Met Gala. This is like if there was like a District 12 uprising in the Hunger Games versus the Capitol. That's exactly what we're basically watching the poor, unfed, like oppressed districts in the Hunger Games rise up against the Capitol tonight. I'm here for it. This is great. This is the literal fucking Hunger Games. We are watching the literal fucking Hunger Games right in front of us right now. I gotta go in a few minutes, though. Oh, man. I don't know if we're gonna get any more updates before I have to go. All right, well, everyone's just gonna have to keep track on their own because it does look like 1,000 protesters are about to descend onto the Met Gala, which is so delicious. I can't even. But sadly, I have to go to my community Zoom because every Monday night at 7 p.m., we do a community Zoom call in which you can come and talk to me and other people in my community. The way that you get access to that Zoom call is by heading over to carlin.substack.com. The link is in the description below. And then I want you to click on this Unwoke Roundup newsletter that is right in the middle of the page. And then if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, underneath this red box, you're going to find your supporter perks when you sign up to support my work at $8 a month, $80 a year. That includes Zoom calls with me and the rest of my community, anyone who decides they want to come on Mondays and Wednesdays, Mondays at 7 p.m., Wednesdays at noon Eastern time. That includes access to the supporter Discord. That includes a 10% off discount code in the Unwoke Art Store. It includes whatever else I've got going on that week as well. So come to a Zoom call. I'm sure we're going to be monitoring what's going on with the Met Gala in real time. Yes, Cajun Lady, I can see what you're saying, but we are about to sign off for tonight. Guys, thank you for joining me. I'm sorry we only got about halfway through the queer ultraviolence lecture, but there is always tomorrow. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll watch something different. Who knows? Maybe I'll be back for a late night stream later. Who knows? Who knows what could happen? Who knows what could happen on a day when we are trying to figure out what is going on with the Gnostic sex cult descending on the Met Gala. All right, guys. That's all I've got for today. You'll have to go do your own research from here on forward or come to the Zoom call, hang out, and we'll be monitoring it. All right, guys. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.